I love that Pastor Lance had the heart for this series, Greater Than, because I think it's really timely and necessary in the circumstances that we find ourselves living in today. We have a big event coming up this week with the voting in our country, and it can feel overwhelming at times, really, really overwhelming with all of the things going on in our culture, in our environment. And then if you have a bunch of stuff going on in your personal life that is overwhelming, the combination of those things can just seem like it's not even doable. And yet, when we're reminded that God is greater than all of those things, those circumstances in our culture and in our personal life, that he is still greater, he is still in control, he is still managing
Amen.
all of that,
Amen.
then it makes us have hope, and it tells us that it's not over, that God is still at work. And it's important to remember that God is greater than any given set of circumstances at any time in any generation. He always has been, he always will be. So I think it's a good time. This is a good time for us as a church to focus on this idea of God being greater than through the month of November. And what's really cool, if you look at the graphic, which is beautiful, I think you'll agree with me, this graphic was created and designed by the youth of our church. And I think that's an awesome thing. I'm calling her Pastor Ashley now. Pastor Ashley and friends have created a class where the youth of our church can attend and be mentored in their areas of gifting, music, video editing, and graphics. And as a result of that, they created this graphic. And I think it just really shows that the greatness of God, and it's just powerful. It has a powerful look to it. And I think that helps us to have that reminder as we start this series. In education, this is called layered learning. It's when you give a visual to go with what you're teaching. It's layered learning. It's actually a really useful and helpful strategy. So it's pretty cool. And then I wanted to let you know that on November 25th in church, on that Sunday, the youth that have been participating in this class, and the youth in general, will be helping and working and serving in the service that Sunday. So it'll be kind of cool to see, as they've been mentored, to see them at work. And I think that'll be a fun thing. So anyway, you don't want to miss that Sunday. So as a result, we are taking some different stories from the Bible, different people from the Bible, who were in circumstances and situations where they needed God to be greater than the circumstance or situation they were in. And my assignment was Esther. And so we're going to look at Esther's life. And I'm going to take you through 3 specific events in the story of Esther where we can see God's greater than. But I just kind of want to walk you through the story real quick, just as a refresher so that you remember. And there's always the possibility that there's someone who's never read that story in the Bible or heard that story in the Bible. So we just want to walk you through that real quick. This story takes place in the Persian Empire 100 years after the Israelites were exiled to Babylon. Many Jews did return to their homeland after they were released, but some remained. And in a small Jewish community in the capital city of Susa, that is where we are introduced to Hadassah, that's her Jewish name, Esther, and her cousin, Mordecai. The book opens up with King Xerxes giving a lavish banquet to show off his great wealth and immense power. And he is also drunk in this, where we meet him here. And he decides in his drunken state that it's not just enough to show off his immense power and wealth, but he also wants to show off his most beautiful wife. So he calls her to come to the banquet so he can show everybody that he's married to the most beautiful woman ever. And she decides not to come. Now, I realize this is her one and only job, being a beautiful wife. But I'm sure that if you got, called to a banquet by your drunken husband and not knowing what's going to happen, you might refuse to go also. But her refusal puts her in a bad situation where she is no longer the queen, because she has angered her husband and king, and so she is deposed. And now there is a need for a new queen. And so they have a royal contest, beauty pageant. It was probably the beauty pageant to end all beauty pageants. They had 9 months of beauty care, so that tells you a lot. But they're all these young women are conscripted from the empire to come, and Esther is chosen, and she's taken to try out for this job, basically, to put it in a nice way. And Mordecai, who's worried about her, who's always looked after her because he's old enough to be her father, so she kind of looks at him as an uncle. He raises her because she has no parents. He follows her because he wants to make sure. So he kind of paces around the city, the castle, and makes sure that if she needs anything, that he's right there. And Esther is in fact chosen, and the king decides that she's the one he wants, and so she's chosen to be queen. And while Mordecai is pacing around the kingdom, one night he hears a plot of some guards to kill the king. And so he tells Esther, Esther tells the king, and the plot is squashed and vanquished. And this story gets written in the annals. A little bit later, a man named Haman, for whatever reason the scripture doesn't really tell us, gets elevated also by King Xerxes and is given all this power, and everybody has to bow to him, and he gets to make all these decisions, and he's given a tremendous favor by the king. And everybody bows except, of course, for Mordecai. And this word gets to Haman that Mordecai won't bow, won't relinquish his power to Haman, and it makes Haman so mad. And so he decides he's going to take care of Mordecai and he's going to kill him. And that's his plan. So he goes to the king. He asks the king to write a decree. He's like, he's a part of these people that, they're peculiar and they don't follow you and they're really no good to you. So let's get rid of them. And the decree says that on the 13th of the month, they're all going to be killed. Men, women, children, everybody going to be killed. And it has the king's signet ring on the document, so it means it can never be repealed or undone. It cannot be undone. In the meantime, Mordecai goes to Esther and goes, look, you got to do something because we're all going to be wiped out. She goes to the king and then and asks to see him, and he receives her, and then she says, I want to have a banquet. I want you to come. She invites Haman and Mordecai, and at the banquet, she reveals that she is a Jew also, and what Haman's plan is. And then his plan is thwarted. The Jews are granted the ability to fight back, and they vanquish, and they survive, and Haman is hanged on his own gallows. Would make an epic movie, I think, and probably has already been. But there are 3 specific things from this story that I want to go back and focus on and look at God's greatness and how he uses it to help us do what we need to do and be a part of his plan and his direction and what he wants for us. The first one is God's plan is greater than our minuses. It's in your, if you have your bulletin, you can look in there, you can look up on the screen. God is greater than our minuses. In Esther chapter 2, verses 5 through 7. Now there was a citadel of Susa, a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin, named Mordecai, son of Jar, the son of Shimei and the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Among these taken captive was the king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, that's her Jewish name, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was known also as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So her only qualifications are her beauty. She doesn't have any other she's an orphaned daughter. She is the wrong ethnicity, and she's never been in the royal court or raised in any kind of royal way, so she doesn't really have any other qualifications. You might say they are her minuses, the things that would work against her in this moment to be used of God to save his people. It is common for us to disqualify ourselves from the plans of God for us because we see all the reasons we're not qualified. We see all the reasons it wouldn't work. Our past, our background, our mistakes, our personality bent, all the different things all the minuses why God could never use or make something of value from the ashes of our lives. And yet it seems to me that's the thing that God likes to use the most. The things that we see as minuses, he sees as ways of working. But if you look at Esther, it would seem that she's the least likely because she's from the wrong ethnicity and because she has been orphaned, raised by her uncle. But God is going to use this Jewish orphaned young woman to rescue his people and change their status in Persia. Her only gift, her beauty. Haman's hatred of this people is not limited to Mordecai. It's rampant in Persia because they had been slaves at one time. And as we know ourselves in this country, it takes a long time for people who were once slaves to be elevated to an equal status and to be treated as equals. And that's what they faced here in this kingdom. So they're hated. Haman hates her, hates Mordecai, and all of their people. So his plan is to get rid of them and to remove them, especially because Mordecai won't bow. But God's viewpoint is greater than just the current moment. He wants to change the destiny of the Jews living in Susa for all time. God's plan is to use us to make a difference in our everyday lives and calling us to touch those around us as he directs us sometimes. He asks us to do things that feel way beyond what is comfortable. And we just and once he does that, we just start thinking of all the minuses, why we can't, why we shouldn't, why we would fail. And let me tell you something, this is a recurring battle for the believer. It's a recurring battle. Like you might find victory in it in one situation and then down the road be God calling you to do something and you're back in it. You're right back with, I can't, I'm not, I don't qualify, I'm disqualified. My minuses are too big to be used by God. And let me tell you why. Because this is a good strategy the enemy uses because it works. It works. It shuts down our ability and our desire to do what God has placed in our heart to do, what he wants us to do. And a lot of times we make it harder than it needs to be. Really, it just requires obedience most of the time. But we think we have to have all the plan and all the pieces in place to see if it would work. And then our minuses get compounded and then we just quit. When really all we need to do is just follow the leader. And this is what Esther did. She did two very important things when she was, after she was conscripted and brought into the kingdom. She follows Mordecai's instructions to the letter. He says, don't tell them your ethnicity. Don't tell them where you're from. And keep that private and keep it secret. And she follows this directive, a simple directive, but a powerful directive in this situation. And she follows it. And then she seeks the counsel of Haggai, who is the head of the harem. And when he counsels her as to what to take into the king when it is her turn to be with the king, she follows this directive. And because of this, she is given favor, and the king chooses her to be the queen. She did not do a master plot or a master plan. She just followed the direction of those in authority over her and did what they said. And as a result, she was granted favor. She was given favor. And she didn't let her minuses get in the way. She just followed the directions that were given to her. This is a good example for us to follow. We sometimes get so worked up in things and lost in everything that's going on around us and how can we make a difference and what can we do, and we get on social media and write stuff we shouldn't say. We do things we shouldn't do. When really, Lord just wants us to follow the leader. You know, speak now. Only say this. Only do this. If we just follow the leader, it makes everything a whole lot more simple. And it also negates our minuses because we're operating in his greatness and his power. We can apply this to our daily life because we're always coming up against that feeling inadequate against our minuses. This last September, I accepted an invitation to go and speak at a women's retreat. Tim's aunt called me, and I've done a couple retreats for her before. And had anybody else called me, I probably would have said no, simply because it's the first quarter of school, and the first quarter of school, it's all I can do to drag myself home. You know, I just want to go home, sit in my blue chair, watch TV, eat something good, and please don't talk to me because I'm tired. But I said I couldn't say no to her, and so I said yes. And I agreed to do 3 sessions. And as we got closer to the time, it turned into 4 sessions. But the topic was change. And if anybody knows anything about change, it's me. So I felt like it was a good fit for me. But as it got closer, my exhaustion and my distraction kind of got in the way, and I knew I had to do 4 sessions. And I just finally, in desperation, said to the Lord, I can't do this unless you show up. You got to help me, because I can't do this on my own. And I got up a Saturday morning a few weeks before, and this idea of things I had done before just came to me, just boop, just dropped in my heart. And I went, oh, I can do this, I can build here, perfect. And in about 2 hours, I had all these things edited and ready to go. And I felt some relief. And I thought, well, when I get down the road, I'll have more time to pray and study and kind of come back over this. And, you know, that never happened, you know, because I'm in the first quarter of school, IEP meetings and all kinds of stuff, drama. And finally, the day, I took Friday off so I could have some time in the morning to have a cup of coffee and have some prayer, and then pack and go and be there by 4 o'clock in Paso Robles. I sit down with my coffee, and my youngest son texts me with needs. You know, and here's the thing. My children don't care that I'm going to speak at a retreat. They don't care. I'm their mother. That's all they care about, you know. And I'm supposed to be available whenever they need me. It doesn't go vice versa, but it goes that way for them, you know. So I had to deal with the need and whatever, and my time got eaten up, and I just couldn't get what I wanted to do, and I had to pack, I had to get in the car, and I had to go. And all of a sudden, the minuses started to pile up. You haven't properly prepared for this. You should have said no. You shouldn't have done this. If you hadn't agreed to this, you could be in your pajamas all weekend, binge watching Netflix. You could have been, all the things, all the minuses. You haven't done a women's retreat in 7 years. What were you thinking? 4 sessions back. I mean, it's just growing bigger and bigger. And I finally get there. And Tim's aunt comes to see me, brought me a little something to eat, and I change my clothes. And as I'm getting dressed, it's all the other things, all the other inadequacies and insecurities. They're just piling up. And I'm like, well, God, I hope you show up because I don't know what's going to happen tonight. Really, I don't know. And I walked into the service, and I sat down, and the worship started. And it was amazing worship. And then after the worship, women had a dance troupe. It's kind of a worship dance troupe. And they got up to perform to a song, and as soon as the music started playing, I started crying, because it's a song that's deeply meaningful to me. And that's the way God does for me. That's the way he talks to me. That's the way he tells me, I'm here, I got it, it's all gonna be good. He gives me some personal thing, and this song was that personal thing for me. And so I just began to relax and lean in and go, okay, I got all these minuses, but you are greater than all those minuses. So I'm just going to trust that, Lord. I'm just going to trust that. And I got up to speak. It was clear. It was easy. It was great. The Lord came. We had a great time in prayer time. And I just knew he is going to give me what I need as I go. As I go through each thing, he's going to give me what I need. And there was a young woman there that I thought might be there, but I wasn't sure. And she was running the sound. She was doing the sound. Been in ministry all her life and had been through a kind of a difficult season. And I knew that what God had given me to speak was building towards a moment. I could feel it, that it was building towards a moment. So I did Saturday morning, and then now we're in Saturday nights, the third session, the hardest session, the session where the real work of the Holy Spirit has to go. And I got done and invited people to the altar, and they came, and I could see her in the back crying, and I knew that God was working in her, but I knew she wouldn't leave her post. She wouldn't leave her post. So when I got done praying for everyone, I just felt the Holy Spirit say, go, just go. And I walked back there, and I put my arms around her, and she just fell into my arms, and she started weeping. And it was like the Holy Spirit just dropped into my heart. This is why I sent you here. I sent you here for her. I sent you here for this moment right now, for this one. And she wept, and I prayed over her. I couldn't ask her about the situation because it was too complicated, and I couldn't put her in that place. I just let God do the work that needed to be done. And I knew that I had come for that moment, that interaction. But see, the devil didn't want that interaction to happen because he wanted her to stay enclosed in the darkness that she was in, the hurt and the pain that she was in. And she probably wouldn't have taken the ministry from anybody else, but she knows my story. She knows my story. I'm well qualified in pain. So she could take from me what I had to give to her. But if I would have let my minuses make my decision, I wouldn't have been there in that moment. God is greater than our minuses. He's more powerful. He's greater. God's plans are greater than our weakness, our inadequacies, and our limitations. God is greater than our minuses. The second point, God's purpose is greater than human agenda. God's purpose is greater than human agenda. Esther 11:14. All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. Esther said, when Esther's words were, this is what Esther's saying to Mordecai. So Mordecai sends her the message. He's going to kill all our people. You're there. You got to do this. And she's like, wait a minute. I can't go to the king unless he calls for me. If he doesn't call for me, I can't go. Because if he doesn't hold out the scepter, then I'm dead. So she's trying to get out of this responsibility, which you can kind of imagine. I mean, she grew up the way she grew up. She wins the beauty pageant of all pageants. And now she's the queen with all that means, with servants and you know, the wealth of an entire, the wealth of the entire kingdom at her disposal. And now Mordecai is messing it up, because he wants her to go ask the king to let her people go. So you could see her little agenda here is like, I got a good thing going. I'm not going to mess it up. You can understand that you might want to hesitate, that she might hesitate. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back his answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. This story is filled with the folly of human agenda, the kings, Hamans, all of it, and the desire to preserve one's place and position, or to be given place and position. And Mordecai does a powerful thing in his warning to Esther, that God did not put her in this place just for her own benefit, but that there is more for her to do. Everything he says are words for us today. God has a purpose in mind when he elevates us in position and favor. When he points out that God will rescue his people with or without her, and that she will not be spared, this is a good truth for us to remember. God's great purposes will go forward whether we're a part or not. If our agenda gets in the way of his agenda, he's going to go forward. He's going to do what needs to be done. And we won't get to be a part of it if we don't agree. We cannot let our human agenda, when we are given favor and position, be more important than the reason God put us in that place in the first place. I've told you before that when I entered my job that I work now, I was given unmerited favor. And in one semester, I was the English department head and found myself sitting at the leadership table. And this group of people that I was now a part of had been a culture that had been together for a while. And the principal was new, and I was new, and the VP was new. But the other department heads and the other people around this table had been together for some time. And I found in the first meeting that there was kind of a culture of verbal demeaning of staff members that weren't present. When they talked about a staff issue or staff difficulty, there was a demeaning way in which they talked about these people that was disrespectful. And that was problematic for me. I didn't like that. Because words are powerful, and they're important, and they shape how people view other people. When you download all your stuff about someone to someone else, you've shaped their thinking. You've changed their thinking about that person. And you might just be mad, or you might just be frustrated, and you just want to vent. But in your venting, you are changing how that person is viewed by the person you're venting to. And that's not fair to the person who's being vented about, because they're not there to defend themselves. And then when you're at a leadership table in a leadership meeting, now we're talking about position, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about demotion, we're talking about other things that have long-term repercussions. Your words are powerful. And I did not like the culture around that table. So I started first with just silence. Not being a part of that discussion, not engaging in it, not being a part of it. And I noticed that my principal did the same thing. I noticed the vice principal did the same thing. So for a season, I just used silence. Then as I gained a reputation and I earned my place at the table, I started redirecting the conversation. When the bashing of someone started, I redirected the conversation back to our agenda or back to other matters that were important. And then finally, I found myself in a small meeting with my principal and the main perpetrator of this culture in the room. And there came a moment when I had the opportunity to speak to this issue. The Lord just gave me the words, and I spoke to the issue. And I just said, look, this is a leadership group meant to set the leadership of this school. This is not a place where people should be demeaned and disrespected for sport. This is a place where we should live the example that we're trying to teach our students, that bullying is not appropriate. What you're doing is bullying. You're just doing it without the person being present. But your words are still changing the perspective of the people in the room about them. And it makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to be a part of that. And I don't want this group to be a part of that. And she apologized and said, you're right. This is not fit for this. And she apologized. And our culture in that meeting changed. It changed. See, sometimes God gives you favor. He uses his greatness, and he puts you in place and position to change a culture, to change an environment. And one person can sometimes do that by yourself. Your willingness not to participate. See, we're all given a choice. When you're invited to the cool kids table and you're given position and favor and place, you get to choose what you're going to do with that. Whether you're going to use it for your own personal benefit, And I get benefit from it. I do. And I enjoy that benefit. But not at the expense of someone else. Are you going to enjoy that? Or are you going to be God's conduit in that situation to change a culture that's inappropriate and incorrect? And that goes further than just a leadership table in a school. That goes in all of the world that we're living in right now. All of the environments that we are all walking in where there is divisiveness and all of that kind of thing. How are you using your words? You know what grieves me so much? I don't like the memes I see on social media that go against the character of someone you disagree with. You are demeaning someone who was created by God. Now, they might be woefully misdirected in their thought process, in your opinion, but that person is still created by God, and God loves them, even in their lostness. Even in their lostness. What we say to people and about people matters. And God does not elevate us in position and place to demean others, but it's to love and respect and honor others, even in their lostness, even in their wrongness. That's what we're supposed, because that's what Jesus did. I mean, he went everywhere where the sinners were, and he elevated them to him. He didn't put them down. He elevated them. He forgave them, and they walked it way, clean and whole and different. Your words matter. Our agenda should always be second to his agenda. His greatness should always outshadow our personal agenda. When God elevates our position and place, his purpose is always greater than just our comfort and our personal agenda. When a teacher at my school is in trouble, it's not long till they're at my door. You know why? Because I'm a safe space. I've created a reputation for being a safe space and someone who will go to battle with you if you need me to go to battle. Now, I will also correct you if you're wrong, and they know that. If they come to get help from me because something has been amiss and drawn attention to, I'll say, well, did you do this, this, and this? No. Okay, well, fix all that first, and then we'll see what happens. But when you create a safe space, you're a safe person, you're a safe space, people will come to you. They will be drawn to you because you're a safe space. Our agenda should always be second to his agenda. He does not elevate you for your own blessing and own good. Number 3, God's power is greater than the evil that surrounds us. We for sure need to be reminded of that, don't we? Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up reaching to a height of 50 cubits and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. And then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. It is not unusual in the life of a believer to encounter seasons of darkness where evil abounds around us. We are an irritant to the one who hates us. Haman hated the Jews because they were different. He hated Mordecai because he would not bow. And he listened to those who egged him on to see what he would do. And he lost his life because of it. Because God preserved Mordecai and his people by waking the king up and causing him to be restless. And as a result, he read the annals and realized that Mordecai had not been rewarded for his protection of the king. So then he decides to honor Mordecai and brings him in and says, what do you want? What is it ask anything, you can have what you want. And Mordecai lets him know about this. And so does Esther at the banquet that she has for them, that she reveals that she is a Jew to the king and that her people are going to be killed and wiped out. And then he asks what can be done. And as a result, Mordecai says, let us, because the decree of the king cannot be removed. Once he puts his signet ring, he can't go back on that. So Mordecai says, well, then give us the ability to fight back. Give us the ability to stand up for ourselves. And so a new decree goes out, and they are able to do that. What that does is it doesn't just rescue these people in the moment. It elevates them from slaves to warriors. It changes how they're viewed and perspective by these people in this country where they live. It changes their perspective. But there's a period of time from the moment when they find out they're all going to die on the 13th before the second decree comes out. There's a season of darkness. What are we going to do? What's going to happen? We're alone and lost, and we're all going to perish. There's a season of darkness, but God is even greater than the darkness, because his plan is to change them from slaves to warriors. Sometimes we find ourselves surrounded by darkness that we don't understand, that we don't know why God put us there and why he's doing what he's doing. But always know this, God always has a plan, and he is greater than the darkness that surrounds you. When I was in Arizona, I taught in the Peoria Unified School Districts. I taught in 4 different schools in 5 years. When you're the low man on the totem pole, that happens to you. And my 3rd year of school, I moved to a school called Country Meadows. If ever a place was misnamed, this is the place. They had a burgeoning group of kids, and they needed more teachers, and the school that I was teaching in was really small, and so one of us English teachers had to move. There were 2 of us. One of us English teachers had to move and go to Country Meadows. And I'd only been there at the school that I was at for 2 years, and the other teacher had been there for 7 years. So I volunteered to go because it was the right thing to do. He had the seniority. His kids were going to that school. It was the right thing to do. Now, you would think that when you do the right thing, that it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows, right? No. Sometimes when you do the right thing, you end up surrounded by darkness. And when I walked into this school for the first time, it was an indoor school, one of the ones built so that the air conditioning didn't go in and out, so the hallways were indoor. Everything was under a dome. And it was very much like walking into a tomb. It felt like that from the first day. This was in a very, very difficult neighborhood. The clientele, the students were very, very difficult students from really, in some places, horrendous backgrounds. Trying to find who was in charge of them, a parent, a grandparent, a guardian, or whatever. Sometimes you couldn't. None of the phone numbers worked, none of the addresses worked, none of the emails worked, nothing. And they were very, very challenging. The school principal was a compassionate man, but he was not a leader, and nor was he a disciplinarian. So he had a hard time leading the school in the way it should be. In fact, one end of school year, 26 teachers left at the same time. That's how bad it was. We would come back from vacations, and there would be graffiti all on the building. The windows would be broken. It was awful. I taught anywhere from 35 to 40 students a class. I had 5 classes. And it was just overwhelming. The darkness was overwhelming. There were moments I just didn't even know if I could get through the day. And I was trying to find some way to manage this situation that I had been dropped into. And I began to notice after a few days that there were in every class a handful of kids kind of leaning in and listening and trying to learn in the chaos that surrounded them, even though I was bringing that under control. And let me tell you something. I'm famous for my classroom management. And I was having a hard time having classroom management in this situation. And I realized that there were this handful of kids. So what I decided to do was move all those kids up to the front row of desks. I would teach to that 4 or 5, and then I would put them in order of criminality to the back. So the medium criminals behind those kids, and then the worst of the worst in the back. So I would teach to these kids and manage this group. That's what I did. And I also noticed early in those days in my homeroom class, there was a beautiful girl. This was 7th grade. I taught 7th grade. Beautiful girl, and had a body that could stop traffic, and beautiful. And the boys were harassing her and messing with her. And these were not boys from good homes. So they would try to touch her in inappropriate places and all. She was like a little, bee trying to buff off the gnats. It was awful. So I moved her to a desk right by my desk. I put my desk along the wall. Usually I sit in the back, but I couldn't do that here. I had to be like a hawk watching them. So I put my desk on the side wall, and I put her desk right by mine. And I noticed that she'd been one of these kids kind of leaning in and kind of trying to learn. So after trying a few things, I decided that if we got to the progress report time, and if there were any kids in my homeroom that were an honorable mention or honor roll or high honor roll, which never going to happen, but if there would, I'd buy them a big candy bar. So I told them that. And she took that seriously and started really working on her grades. And when progress report time came, she was at the honorable mention line and the only one to get a candy bar in 40 kids. So I started asking her, talking to her a little bit about her work, and we'd just chat a little bit every morning. And sometimes she would ask me for help with other classes, and I would do that, not math, but everything else I would help her with that. And she began to climb. She went from honorable mention to honor roll to high honor roll. And the last 2 quarters, she was on high honor roll. And she found peace sitting there, and I kept her just right by my desk the whole year. And I would like to say to you that I walked through this season of darkness with tremendous spirituality and victory and believing that God was greater and that I could change the culture and that something marvelous and wonderful would happen in this school. But that would be a lie. I mostly whined, moaned, and groaned my way through the year. Every journal entry, God, what did I do to deserve this? When are you going to rescue me? This is awful. I'm in hell. When are you going to get me out of here? I had nothing personal on my desk or at school at all because they'd steal it. So I had no personal items or whatever. But the urge to grab my purse and walk out that building in the middle of a class was becoming overwhelming. So I got a picture of my boys and I put it on the computer. I got a kid in college and a kid in private school. I have to work this job no matter what. And I would just put it on the computer. And when I want to leave, I look at that picture. And it was awful. It was awful. And I got to the end of the school year and I had already been on the transfer list. I was looking for a way out. I mean, whatever train comes by, I'm getting on it. And it was the last day of school. And we had our homeroom at the end of the day, so I dismissed the room, and I just took a minute, so the God in me, the greatness of God in me, somehow made it to the surface through all the whining, complaining, and moaning. And I said to this young girl, I said, you've had an incredible year. What you've done is amazing. To go from hardly any decent grades to high honor roll for 2 quarters. I said, and let me tell you, and I knew her background. She lived alone with just an aging grandmother who was very sick, and there was no one else. There was no one else. There was not another person, just the grandmother. And I said to her, what you've done is amazing. And if you can manage to do this in 8th grade, stay on that high honor roll list through 8th grade, when you get to the end of 8th grade year and you get ready to go to high school, you'll qualify for pre-AP classes. And if you get in all pre-AP classes, you won't have to put up with these nasty boys. You won't have to do any of this stuff. It's a whole different level of student, and it'll get easier for you. And because of your family background, you will qualify for all kinds of money. And the school counselor will help you. When you get to be a freshman, if you've maintained this GPA, you talk to the school counselor and she'll help you map out a plan for your classes and for college. And you don't have to live the life you came from. And she said, really? I said, yes. I go, and you can do it. You've already proven you can do it. And she said, thank you. And I said goodbye to her, signed her little yearbook, and off she went. And I just was like, I'm praying my way out of here. And happily in July, a transfer came open. I signed up, I interviewed, and I was out. I went to a little tiny elementary school, K through 8 in our district, and I was a happy camper. But I often felt defeated, really defeated by that experience, because I hadn't changed the culture at all. In fact, the culture had mostly changed me, crying and moaning and groaning. I hadn't changed, and I could not understand why God left me in that dark place for a whole year. Why I had to even go there in the first place. What was this all about? It was overwhelming. What was this all about? And on the last week we lived in Arizona, I was finishing up my fifth year in the Peoria district at a new school, and I was finishing up the year. And Taylor was graduating from high school on Thursday night, and the truck was coming on Sunday, and we were moving to Carlsbad, California. And I was up early, and I was walking into a Walmart so that I could buy a few things to take to school that day. And I heard my name, Mrs. Clements. And I turned around, and there stood this beautiful girl. Beautiful girl. Do you remember me? I said, I don't. Because kids change a lot from 7th grade to high school. They change a lot. And I've taught a lot of kids, so I don't always remember them. I said, I'm sorry, honey, I don't. Can you refresh my memory? She goes, do you remember teaching at Country Meadows? I said, yeah, who could forget? Yes, I do. Do you remember the girl that sat in the seat in front of your desk? I go, is that you? It's me. I'm so happy to see you, Mrs. Clements. Because I want to tell you something. You were right. You were right. I did it. I did exactly what you said. I stayed on high honor roll all the way through 8th grade. And when I got to the end of 8th grade, the counselors came. I got in all pre-AP classes. I've had the best school year of my life. And the counselor's already talking to me about what college do I want to go to. She's going to help me plot out a plan. And you're right. She said that because of my background, there'd be all kinds of money for me to go as long as I keep my GPA like this. And she said, Miss Coach, you were right. I'm so glad to see you. Thank you. Okay, I got to go because the high school started at 7:20 there. I got to go. I'm going to be late for school. And she hugged me and she said, thank you. I'm so glad I got to see you to tell you that. And off she went. And I was walking into Walmart with the tears streaming down my eyes. How good is God? How good is God that he didn't let me leave Arizona not knowing what that dark season had all been about. That he made sure that I was going into Walmart, which I did quite regularly before school, and she was coming to go to get something for school, that we would have that moment outside the store so that I could know that the darkness had purpose, that it had meaning, that maybe I didn't change a culture, but I changed the culture for one. Someone who had no one in her corner, that God knew there was something in her that wanted more than where she'd come from. And he sent me there to be that person, to change her culture, the one. And the scripture tells us he will leave the 90 and 9 for the one, won't he? Because God cares about the one. Sometimes God leaves us in the darkness so that we can change the culture of the one, because he's greater than the darkness. He will bring something beautiful out of that darkness no matter what, because he is greater than anything this world has to throw at his direction. And that's what he wants for us. He wants us to just be obedient, to not give in to the minuses, to not live in the minuses, but just to be obedient when he speaks to us. He wants us to put our human agenda aside for his agenda. And he wants us to understand that even when he lets us go into the darkness, he's going to be with us, and he's going to be something fruitful out of it. And I know some of you, because of what's going on in our country with the voting and everything this week, some of you are going to walk into cultures of darkness this week. There's going to be difficulty and challenge. And I want to say to you, the greatness of God is in you, and he's going to be with you. And he's going to give you what to say and when to say it, and all you have to do is obey. You don't have to come up with a plan. You don't have to figure out how it's all going to work. You don't have to do any of that. You just have to listen to what he says to you and then just do that. Just do that one little simple thing, and he will use you in that way, because he is greater than the darkness in us. And I think it would just be important today to maybe we need to spend some time in the altars, and Ashley's gonna play and lead us in a song of worship. And I don't know, maybe you're in a place of darkness. You're just in it, and you don't know why you're there, and you don't know what God wants to do, but you're there and you got to figure it out. And maybe you just need someone to pray for you today, to help you have the strength to walk back into it tomorrow, or when you go home today, or wherever it is, that he would give you the strength to do that. Maybe you just need that. Maybe your minuses have just piled up to the point where you're paralyzed and immobile, and you just need him to come and remind you that his greatness is bigger than your minuses. I don't know where you are, but God does. And if you want to come and spend some time in prayer, I think that would be a good thing for us to do. So if you want to just stand, if everybody just stands, and we'll just worship with Ashley. And if you want to come and pray for a few minutes, please feel free to do that. I'm just going to release you to do that now.
You're a good, good Father, but to you